Hello, and welcome to Dream Green Sustainability Practices in Early Childhood Programs, a webinar that's part of the Minnesota Outdoor Nature-Based Learning series, which is a collaboration between the Department of Education and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. In this webinar, we will learn about sustainability practices and be inspired by a zero-waste school in northern Minnesota. The objectives for this webinar are to understand the benefits of outdoor and nature-based learning for young children based on the research, to learn from experienced outdoor early childhood educators about best practices and considerations for promoting environmental stewardship, to examine and develop policies to support sustainability practices, and to discover resources for implementing outdoor and nature-based learning in early childhood programs in schools. The presenters include Dr. Sheila Williams-Ridge, the director of the University of Minnesota Child Development Lab School, and April Hapowski, the director of the Little Barnyard Preschool. The content featured in this webinar includes a land acknowledgement, discussion around introducing children to sustainability, sharing of stewardship ideas, a discussion about sustainability practices and policies, and sharing of resources. And just to note that this webinar was originally recorded live in the spring of 2023, but we feel that it still has very relevant information. And at times there may be opportunities for breakout sessions where you will be able to just pause your video and contemplate the questions being proposed and go ahead and take notes. Just want to make sure folks are aware, though, that this webinar is not a develop-approved webinar, but you can still receive a certificate of participation by completing an evaluation of learning survey. Please enjoy the webinar.
I'll just start saying thank you for joining us to talk about sustainable practices in early childhood programs. And I'm super excited to have here today April. April, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm April Hebikoski. I run a nature-based preschool here in Esko by Duluth. And it's a preschool on my property, on my hobby farm. And I try to run it as low waste as possible, being like more of a zero waste school. So yeah, I'm excited to share that with all of you guys, different things that we do here. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, April. I'm Sheila Williams-Ridge. I work at the University of Minnesota at the Child Development Laboratory School. And I do a lot around nature-based learning and sustainability with children, but also with our university students. So I'm excited to come and tell you a little bit about what I do as well. And so I'll get started. We wanted to start with our that this is part of the Early Childhood Outdoor Learning series presented by MDE. And probably you all know that because, well, you got here to this webinar, so you had to register, and so you were probably able to find all of that. But this is what the booklet about outdoor learning looks like, and we're excited to share that with you. So Jenny Hanlon is also on tonight and will be around if you have questions about that project. She can also answer them. Jenny, Anna, Dudke, and I have been working on this project for about a year now. So we're really excited to bring you this webinar. It's one of a series of webinars that we've been offering, and it's the last in the series that we have out right now. They're all available on the website. So I'll share that with you in just a minute, but we wanted to start out on this Earth Day Eve with a land acknowledgement. It's really important as we are giving really thanks to the earth for all of the things that it gives to us, thinking about ways that we can give back, but also acknowledging the people who have been caretakers of this land for many, many years, from time immemorial. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge their stewardship of the land and all of the hard work and love that they have given to what we all call home today. And so there are two websites that we shared that we think are really important for you to learn more about the original caretakers of the land that you're on. And so there's Treaties Matter, which is put together by the Minnesota Historical Society. And also, if you're wondering, who has inhabited the lands that you live on, there's a link in the middle, nativeland.ca. There are a lot of resources there. So if you have questions about that, we can also answer those. And in the resource booklet that we put together, we also have more information and resources about that. Some of our past webinars, we've done seasonal ones about curriculum in the fall, curriculum in the winter, curriculum in the spring. We did one just last week about planning your outdoor space. It was wonderful, called Changing Landscapes. And then one at the very beginning of the webinar series was about being inspired to do nature-based learning practices. So if you haven't seen any of those, they're available on the MDE website, and captions are available right now in English and in Spanish. So we think that hopefully that helps more people be able to access it. And just in about a week and a half or 2 weeks almost, maybe it's not that long, I think it is 2 weeks from now, but the group that put the booklet together will be doing some presentations at the Early Childhood Summit. And so Lucy from Early Learning Services can share a little bit of information on how you can sign up. There are lots of really great sessions during that 2-day conference, so look for that. And we wanted to just start by thinking about how this fits in with Nature Play. So this infographic is by the Children in Nature Network, and they have several infographics that talk about the benefits of nature play for children. And this one is about how nature play can encourage care for the earth. So we do this as children develop meaningful relationships with nature, both trees and plants, but also with rocks. We have a group of children right now that are very interested in mushrooms at my school. So all of the parts of nature, children can start to form really important relationships with them through play. And then there's this quote that I believe Anna put in our last webinar that I really liked. I just finished the book Braiding Sweetgrass a few weeks ago, and I know that Robin Wall Kimmerer will be here in Minnesota speaking at I believe at the Northrop, so you can look for that information online. If you go to the University of Minnesota Northrop Hall, there's information on her speaking engagement. I believe she's also speaking in Duluth around the same time. So I'll just read it. Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. I think that that's something that we all should cultivate in ourselves, but also in the children that we work with. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how we do that here in the Twin Cities at our campus. And then I want to give lots of time because April does some really amazing things at her school up north. So just this is a picture of my daughter out in a raspberry field. Starting early has such lasting results. We know that so many attitudes that young children have about the world around them happen in their very early years. So we want to make sure to give them experiences in nature as often as possible so that they can learn to cultivate nature and cultivate their relationship. So the Children in Nature Network and the North American Association for Environmental Ed have a joint library where you can find the research that supports some of the things that children are learning outside, both are around the ways that children benefit in their development, but also the ways that children cultivating a relationship with nature benefits the earth and all of us who live on it. There's also a series by the University of Minnesota Duluth that talks about flourishing in nature and talks about positive behaviors that children gain through their experiences in nature. So those are both available. We have those resources. I believe most of them are in the booklet, but we'll put those links in the chat, and I can do that while April is talking. So we give a lot of hands-on experiences with young children, especially around waste, recycling, and composting. It's something that children can see really clearly. I brought in some flowers and the children use them as dinosaur food. We got some new outdoor furniture. We ordered some of the Outlast products from Community Playthings that are really wonderful, but they come in these giant boxes. And so we use those for several weeks. Actually, we just are starting to get rid of the last ones. And I believe that the boxes arrived in um, January. So we've been using them for a while, but children have been painting on them and making different things. One was like a hot chocolate shop for a while, lots of different things that children have used those boxes for. And then when families get, interesting containers, or something delivered in an interesting container, we try and find ways to reuse that. So the picture on the right, the family had ordered some jars, I believe, some type of specialty glass jars, and they came in this thing that was like a foam, or like a foam type of substance, but they were exactly the size of bricks. And so the children were filling them with water, and then this child was trying to kind of measure them against the bricks on our wall, and we started making some bricks out of that. So it's a pretty fun project. And we have students who are learning to be teachers at our program, and they are inspired to make things for children that they can play with. So this teacher was talking about recycling and how we know what's recycled, but they also played a little game with it, and then they sorted. We also have a group of toddlers right now that's been doing a lot of sorting activities. And like finding trash. And of course today, because today was the sunnier of the days this week, the children did a lot of things around the building with picking up trash, and we were working on garden beds and doing things that they can to positively impact the community and nature. We also do lots of types of composting at our facility, but my favorite type didn't start out as composting. It was mostly to raise mealworms, because we have reptiles that eat them. And so I'll show you that picture next. But we have a nice mealworm habitat. And these are some pictures of them. We put our leftover snacks in there, and the mealworms kind of take care of the rest. And every year you can see kind of the base of their aquarium or terrarium continues to grow. And we can take out some of that soil and use it for our plants. And the children talk about how that works, and how worms and other bugs do things. And like I said, we have a group that's very interested in mushrooms and the job that they do. They were laying out on the ground today, trying to connect each other, because they're like, mushrooms are all connected. And so they're down there on the floor connecting to each other and just having a really wonderful time. So it's exciting to talk about these things with young children. They get really interested in it. And some people might not find the picture of the mealworms eating oranges to be as beautiful as I do, but I really think they're kind of beautiful insects. We also use them to feed our turtle. So our turtle, Boxy, she eats like the tops of fruits and vegetables that we kind of cut off, or, if a piece of something is a little bit soft, she doesn't mind. She really likes that. So the children know that Boxy likes those things. And then she also eats the mealworm. So we try and to use up all of the scraps that we can right inside, so that children can see the process of what happens, and what you can do with things that are kind of left over. And I just wanted to share a couple of books. The one on the left, I didn't mean to keep the one in the right on. It's just, they were on the same slide, but the one on the left is about children's relationship with a tree, and kind of how they care for it and how the tree cares for them. I think that is a wonderful thing. The book on the right is also a book that I like, about caring for, well, it's not really about caring for animals, but it ends up being about caring for animals. And then children ask a lot of how and why questions, especially around how things are made. And I think it's really important for us to talk about with children how things are made, and how everything that we have, the toys, the crayons, the paper, that all of that is made by someone. Things just don't appear, or they don't come from a grocery store, that we can have deeper relationships. So there's a series of welcome books, and it's really how lots of things are made. Most of the time I just, we look at the pictures and we talk about it, but sometimes children really want to try to make that thing. So several years ago, we had a camp that was called From Scratch, and we we started with a pretty bare room, and the children arrived, and we played outside for a while, and we went inside, and they're like, where was all the stuff? And we're like, well, this camp, we're going to talk about like, how do you make things? And so we made a list about like, what do we need to have a classroom? What are the things that we need? And so the children talked about toys and paper and crayons. And so we went and and got resources so that we could start to figure out how things are made. We also made our snacks for the whole session, for the whole summer session. We made wheat crackers from scratch. We made popsicles by buying fresh fruit and blending it and pouring it into molds. And so the children were able to see lots of things and how they're made. And we think that children understanding the work that goes into production, but also what they can do on their own without wasting, it also helps them understand that some things can be repaired, right? Like if you break a crayon in half, it doesn't mean that the crayon is bad. You can use a small piece of the crayon, or you can just get the end hot again and melt it back together. And so children start to understand that when they know how things are made. And also the book on the right, lots of you may know, it's a pretty favorite book to talk about when you want to introduce some life cycle ideas to children. And it's just a simple book about a dead bird and kind of how children really matter-of-factly talk about the bird and what happened. And it's so true to what happens in classes. Sometimes children want to honor it, and we want to encourage them to honor life as much as possible. So I think that reading books like this is a wonderful thing to do with children. And then my favorite book about reusing things is this book called Joseph Had a Little Overcoat, and it's actually a song, but they made it into a book, and so it's basically he has an overcoat and it gets old and worn, and he makes it into different things, and throughout the story it gets smaller and smaller as things that get worn do. But I love the concept of that. He never throws it away, and even at the end there's a little twist. I won't spoil the whole story for you, but really thinking about that, if you have something that's of good quality or starts to get old and worn, which is what happens in the book, you can create something else out of it, and something that is equally special and that you can do special things with. And so he has this coat that he's able to continue to just live his life with the support of his coat and the other things that he can make from it. And then the salamander room is a favorite just because it talks about the importance of animal habitats, and I think when we think about what animals need to survive, but also to be content or even happy outside, this book I think helps give children an idea of that. Thinking about what do animals deserve in their habitats, just like what we need in our own habitat. So I wanted to share that book with you. And then there are some books even for infants and toddlers. The series, The Teeny Greenies, has a composter, a recycler, and a gardener version. And these are pretty fun books with a little flap inside. Very young children can connect with them in a meaningful way. So I just wanted to share those as a resource for you as well. And then, giving children opportunities to think about the place that they live as a wonderful place. It doesn't have to be in the, wild to be special. And nature all around us is very special. So the two books on the left, The Some Bugs and City Babies, are fun. They just talk about bugs that you probably see or animals that you see in cities. And helping children appreciate nature nearby will help them form a stronger relationship, because it's going to be something that they care about, that they can see every day, and places that they can make an impact to make things better. And then, of course, there should be opportunities for children to get into places that are a little bit more wild. And so Fatima's Great Outdoors is actually, the author lived in Minnesota when she was young. And so it's actually based on her experiences here in Minnesota going camping. So I wanted to share that one as well. And then just, as children get older and you want to give them opportunities to do different things, there are magazines that talk about bigger projects that children can do. Of course, you can make those developmentally appropriate in lots of ways, but both of these resources are made for children that are a little bit older. But lots of ways that children can make an impact, and I think it's really important to talk to children that their work in the world is important, and what they do makes a difference. So I really like those two. And then it's time for April.
Perfect. Thank you. So what I want to go into is the methods that I use to try to live a what I personally do in my own life, but also in my school. I follow these different R's of sustainability. They're often known as the R's of zero waste, if anyone's heard of zero waste before. That's basically where when you live a more zero waste lifestyle, by that type of philosophy, you're just trying to live a more earth conscious life, where you're reducing your footprint more on the earth. And you are, a lot of it is about like sending less materials to the landfill and to the recycling facilities, and trying to keep materials within a reuse cycle rather than having it more single use where it only can be used once and then has to be sent somewhere. So there's a lot of different things around the concept of sustainability, and zero waste is just part of it. So the R's of sustainability that I follow within my personal life, again, and within my school is first, what you want to try to do is refuse what you do not need. That is the top one, because to try to reduce the amount of waste that we create, schools can create a lot of waste. And so if we can refuse what we don't need, and instead go for things that are more reusable. So for example, like refusing the plastic cutlery or silverware that you might use at lunchtime or snack time, and instead going for more reusable options like the metal stainless steel forks and spoons, things like that. So when we start to refuse materials within our classrooms, we are able to reduce the amount of resources that we're taking from the earth, and we're also reducing the amount of trash that we're putting in the landfill, or the amount of materials that we would be putting into the recycling facility. The recycling system, although it is helpful, it is very flawed in a lot of ways. And so as you can see, if you follow these R's in order, recycle is almost at the very bottom. We don't want to be just like buying things for our school that we know for sure we can recycle and thinking that is the best way to do it, when really we could be trying to refuse these things in the first place. So the next is reduce to what you need. I'm going to go into that a little bit more on a different slide, but how I see that within my school is just really when we get out in nature and we give children experiences out there. We don't really need to bring a bunch of man-made things out there for the children to learn from. We can reduce down to just learning in nature, with nature, and we don't need to be constantly taking materials and resources from the earth to use in our classroom. Of course, those things are beneficial, and I have a classroom full of different things, but having this mindset of how to connect children to nature, one of the best ways that I've found is just getting out there on our nature hikes without anything else that we bring with, and the children can use a stick for whatever they want. It can be a cane, it can be a sword, it can be a paintbrush. If you've ever read the book With Children Not a Stick, that's a wonderful book to read, just to get their imaginations and creativity flowing. Reuse, again, instead of single-use items. So instead of the paper towels, we have reusable cloths that we use for cleaning and for drying our hands. And I'll show you a picture of how that's set up in my classroom later on. So there are a lot of different reuse options out there, and I'll try to go into more, but that's just the general concept. And then repairing things that can be fixed. With children, there's often things that get ripped and broken. And so if we can try to repair things instead of send them to a landfill as much as we can, that's great to keep materials within a reuse cycle. If you can't fix something, try to repurpose the materials instead of, again, sending it out. And then recycle, of course, is part of it. But again, we are trying to first refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, and repurpose things. And then we look to recycling things if we can't figure out anything else. And then the last is rotting, those compostable materials. So that would be like food scraps. And like in my personal life, I even like compost my hair and fingernails, like anything of nature. Really, we can be composting. Wooden toys that break that are not possible to repair, those get put in the compost. Or I use it to heat the school because we use a fire, a stove with a fire. So that's just another kind of fun way that I reuse things. In this picture here, my husband actually helps change people's tires out quite a bit. And so we often have all these tires on in the garage. And so after a while, I started bringing them back to our tree swing area. And now we have this big pyramid of tires that are bolted together. And it is a really solid structure. It's amazing. And the kids can climb on that. And it's just a perfect way to repurpose something rather than sending it away. Go ahead and switch. Thank you. So different activities that I do for environmental stewardship with children is first, I try to use natural materials as much as I can for art. Some different examples. I love the book Leaf Man. And then reading that out in the fall under the maple tree. Bringing our homemade glue that I make with tapioca starch. And usually we have some corn husks, hair, you can see in the picture that I give the children, some beans, maybe from the garden, or different seeds, pine cone sticks. There's all kinds of fun things that you can use from nature, just to connect children more with it, but also to veer away from more plastic-based materials for art. So that's a fun way to do it. Another one is a nature buddy. If you find a Y-shaped stick and you put a straight stick, so like the Y shape would be the 2 feet, the 2 legs, and then you put another stick across it. And if you tie them together with yarn, you have basically a body shape. And then you can put, if you can dig up some earth clay, if you have earth clay on your school grounds, or you can even buy earth clay and you can use that as a head, and then you can send the kiddos out to the woods and they can find different things to add to their nature buddy to decorate it. So those are just 2 fun ways that I've done that before. Other things are making a bird nest with different plants and feathers. Earth clay is another good material to use for that. We also use earth clay to for the children to make pots, and then we like to cook over fires often and just have campfires just to kind of connect with that element. And so you can also just put those pots on the fire and they will harden. And so that's just fun ways to get the children more engaged with the natural elements of the earth, but also to avoid those different, more synthetic materials. Another way is you can start a school garden. We use our food from our garden for a lot of different activities. We supplement meals with from our garden. So especially in like the fall when we have a lot coming out, we will mainly be having our snacks from the garden. And we may be cooking over the fire with that. Other ways, you could have fruit trees. You can, in the indoor setting, like during the winter, we like to do a lot of windowsill gardening, where you just find a container in the recycling bin and fill it with dirt, and then you can plant different things like lettuce, and we've even grown like beans and pea pods, plants on a windowsill. It's really fun. And then also my school does do a community garden as well, where the parents, if they would like to be involved with that, can help tend the garden, and then they also can take things home for their family. Another fun activity that I've done, which I kind of wish I would have included a picture on this, was we, at the end of each summer, when we have a pretty large amount coming out of our garden. We do something similar to a farmer's market where the children help to collect all the things from the garden. And then we set up tables outside. And at the end of class, we invite the parents to come 15 minutes early. And everything's priced in quarters, so the children can practice one-to-one counting with being paid from their parents for this thing that they grew in the garden all summer. Then they can accept that the quarters as money for that, and it's just a fun exchange between the children and the parents. And then it's connecting school to home as well, because they're bringing that food home then and using it in their meals. So another way is to just have different animal interactions. Sheila had mentioned the mealworms. Other things that we do here are we raise baby animals. So we have bunnies, and we like to have a litter of bunnies where the children can hold this baby bunny in their hand from day one, basically, and they can see the change from this little bald baby bunny that has its eyes and ears sealed shut. Within a couple weeks, it already has its eyes open, ears open, it has hair, it's starting to hop around more like a bunny. And it's just a great way for younger children, especially, and all ages really, but for the ones that like to have more of that quicker progression with the different stages of their life, that's a really fun one to do. Also, we just do a lot of feeding and caring for the animals. We have buckets that the children use. I have pictures of each of the animals at the farm, either the goats or the chickens or the bunnies, and I put a little bit of food into a bucket, and the kids can pick one bucket to go to the farm to, and that just kind of starts them out at the farm, and then they can start they can go hold the bunnies or pick them dandelions to eat, or they can feed the goats hay from the hay house, or there's so many fun things to do. So depending on what you have available for your school, just you could do indoor pets or outdoor pets, but it's a great way to just connect children to the natural world by having animal interactions. And something that we have to do at times with having animals, as Sheila was actually mentioning, I wanted to kind of go off a little bit more with this and what we do, is sometimes when you have animals, they will die. And actually that just happened today on our farm. One of our older bunnies, Lavender, died. She was one of the older pets on our farm, and it was her time. And so during our morning class, we went out and saw that she had died in her cage. And so we don't hide that. It's all part of the natural cycle. And so the children and I brought her over where we could all be around her. We looked at her and they got to ask questions, and they all shared a lot of different experiences that they had around maybe different pets that they may have had that died. It was just a great experience. And then they helped dig the hole where we could bury her in a grave. They all picked something special from the woods, like a dried flower or a rock or a stick that they found special. Some of them even today found some green leaves on the ground that they were starting to pick. They're like, bunnies love green leaves. So they were bringing those to put in her grave with her. And then we buried her. And they got to say a final goodbye. And now that grave will be there for the children to visit when they want to go visit her again. And one thing that I have done is if I know that there was an animal that has died that I would like the kids to do more of an activity, of a closure activity, I'll have some paints, more eco-friendly paints that they can paint a rock and put on the grave to mark her grave. This paint is a little bit thicker because it's made with flour, but it is a natural paint. It's not like acrylic or something that would be more of a pollutant. And then we also used just some coarser salt so that we weren't using glitter or anything, but it just made it a sparkly type of rock with that paint. We had used turmeric powder and beet powder to make that paint. And so if we're putting it out into the environment, I prefer for it, when it gets washed off the rock, that it's something that won't be really polluting the environment at all. And then for These are just some examples for our nature hikes that we do. Just getting children out in different environments. We have a bog, as you can see in the middle of the middle picture there. It's just this most magical, beautiful place. And depending on where you are, if you're in the middle of a city or more in the woods, you can get outside and get children connected to nature wherever you are, even just connecting to a tree. But different things that we do, we have a pond that the children then can use this hand pump water pump, and they can pump it. I feel like they pump it just hundreds and hundreds of times a day, where it's just basically water coming out of the pond. And you could put a filter on it where you're not sucking up different creatures that are in the pond. Yeah, that's just a great way to get the gross motor skills in, but also to connect them more to nature. Like even today, the kids in the playscape were trying out the water pump, and they're like, why isn't it working? And so we had to stop and talk about and look at the pond and how it's still frozen, and we won't be able to get the water up until it's melted and ready to go. Another thing is you can see in the left picture that there's a painted turtle swimming right next to our canoe. It's pretty amazing the things that you can do when you connect so deeply with nature and they're just all around you. Is that when we are in this canoe, the turtles come right up to the canoe and we can pet them on the back, and they'll just keep swimming back and forth by us, and it's really amazing. So go ahead and switch. So how can you save money? I know we're kind of working on tighter budgets, running schools. And so how can sustainable choices save you money? There's a lot of different ways. I feel like now that I live more consciously of the earth, I'm actually saving a lot more money, because we can get a lot of things from nature that is free. And not to say that we should be over harvesting things. We of course want to be making sure that we are still maintaining the earth by not being greedy and taking too much. But there are so many different natural materials that we can use and in our classrooms. So one way is if you can acquire and buy materials and toys used as much as possible through thrift stores, garage sales. You can ask families of the school or just the community in general to donate unwanted items of theirs. Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace are great places to buy things used for your classroom. The reason that this is more of a sustainable choice is because we are supporting the reuse system. If we don't have these systems in place and people aren't using them, like thrift stores and things, if we're not supporting those, then they won't be there to be able to accept different materials and objects that people no longer want. And they could get put into a waste stream like the landfill or recycling facility when they are perfectly usable how they are. So if we can try to support those systems as much as possible. And it also saves you money. Buying brand new items versus a secondhand item is way cheaper. Another way you can save money is to use repurposed materials. Again, like the tire structure, or if children do a lot of crafts, and we have a lot of paper scraps around. And so we will often have a bin up where all the paper scraps go into, and then we make it into a mulch. The children are part of that process. They help to make it into that mulch. And then we put it on a screen and we let it dry. And it's paper to be used again for art. And we do a lot of paintings on those. So that's another great way to just try to, recycle at home actually, but repurposing those materials. Use items from the recycling bin as materials. If we ever have to buy something in a box, I like to try to cut out part of the box, like the bigger side. Oftentimes those boxes on the back, on the inside, are just plain cardboard, and we use those for our name writing. We use them for painting, any activity. I just have them available for the children. And different jars, I pretty much save all of my glass jars and lids, and we use those. So like for Mother's Day, I usually have the children go out and pick wildflowers, and we just use glass jars, or you could use plastic jars, whatever you have in there, as a vase rather than having to buy vases or something like that. And again, then it's connecting them to the natural world, seeing the beauty in nature, the flowers, and finding value in that. Again, the paper scraps too is another thing that you can use to make your own paper, or just for art projects with different paper collages. We have like a little bin that we just put paper scraps into that could be reused again. You could choose reusable items instead of single-use items. Again, like plates, cups, bowls, silverware, all of that stuff is reusable here. We don't buy anything that we throw away. We don't even buy things that have to go into the compost, because again, compost was the last R. We want to try to pick reusable things first rather than buying compostable plates, because then we're taking those resources from the earth over and over and over again when we have to continue to replenish those compostable plates. And instead we can have one reusable set. It may cost a little bit more money up front, but again, look for things secondhand. I usually just go to the thrift store and I buy stuff there, and it's super cheap. And then you just keep reusing them over and over again. So it actually saves you money in the long run. Same with napkins. You can use cloth napkins, cloth rags. Just make sure that a lot of times with licensing, you need to use them once and then put them in a dirty bin so that they can be washed. They may not feel that dirty if the kids are just drying their hands after washing their hands once, but that is something that they ask to do. So if you are using cloth rags, just make sure you know what your licensor is wanting, and that's what we do. And then use food scraps to feed classroom pets. We have chickens and goats and bunnies that food scraps go to. We have like the apple cores will go to the mealworms, or they'll go to the bunnies. Same with like different peelings. The goats like to eat them. If you don't have like those bigger farm animals, there's like bunnies. If you have a bunny in your classroom, they might eat some of those scraps as well, or peelings. So just if you can't feed those food scraps to pets, then you could compost it. And that would be another way to do it. So these are just some pictures. So the picture on the left top is just how we label our clean and our dirty towels. So in the bathroom where we wash hands a lot, I just have a full bin of clean towels, and I just wash them after their one-time use. And that's the way that we're able to not have to buy paper towels, and also we're not taking those resources from the earth. And yeah, it's just a fun way to do it. The top right picture is a way that we like to do more off-grid things. So I love to do light play with the children. I think it's really a fun way. And it also connects children with the earth. Again, we're using the natural sunlight coming in through our windows. We have a mirror that these things are on, and then we have a sheet of like a white sheet, like a cloth, or you could just use like a big white piece of paper too. And as the sunlight is coming directly through the window, if you have one like that, just put a table next in the sunlight and put a mirror on it, and then put a chair with something draped over it, and for it to shine up on, and then the kids can build on this mirror. And it's basically like nature's projector. And it's just a fun off-grid way of doing it without using electricity, or using this big old projector that takes light bulbs and electricity to use, and all of that. The bottom left picture is I try to ask families if they can to bring their children's lunches as low waste as possible. So like apple slices, carrot slices, nuts maybe that were bought in bulk at the store. I just give them tips on how to do this. Of course, if children bring things that are prepackaged, I'm not going to, judge them for that, but it's just more of putting it out there. I do write a blog, Zero Waste Nature School, if you want to see kind of an idea of how you could get that conversation started through a letter to families. And you can take and leave whatever you want of that and make it your own. But that's the one way that I like to just encourage the families to reduce the amount of waste, because oftentimes kids' lunches can be full of a lot of plastic that has to be thrown away. And then as much as you can, if you can buy things that are for snack and for lunches that are more in bulk, that don't have that packaging around them. So a lot of whole foods, basically, fruits and vegetables, different flours and like oats we like to buy in bulk at the store. I usually go to the co-op here in Duluth, but wherever you're at, there might be a bulk store. You can just basically buy things in your own cloth bag from those big bins on the wall, if you need like flours or dried food. But otherwise, like produce, I just get it without putting it in a plastic bag at all. And that's another way to avoid making more trash and potentially getting things out into the environment that would cause it to be litter. So yeah. And then a few more things about saving money. If you can, try to community share as much as you can. Again, this is more of a sustainable choice because we are supporting a reuse secondhand market like the library. People bring things there all the time too that they don't want. They donate it to the library, and the library is this amazing resource that we have to have books and games and different things. So we do that quite a bit. You could even do a toy swap with different people, or even other schools if you want to just switch out your toys. That's a way to save money, and it's also just reusing things. Highlight experiences over things. Again, nature is the best playground. Just get children out in nature. We don't need all these man-made things made of plastic and metal and all this stuff where we're mining things out of the ground. And just get kiddos outside and introduce them to the pine cones and the puddles and the trees that they can climb. And that is just one of the most amazing things that I do here, like hatching having the monarch butterflies or having them help grow a garden. Another fun activity is a sit spot, if you have heard of that. It's basically where you get the kiddos outside, wherever you are, and you have them just find a place out in nature. We like to do it like 4 times a year where the kids get to experience all the different seasons since we're in Minnesota and we get that amazing thing. So we just go to our sit spot each time and we sit for this age with preschool, it's like, 2 to 4 minutes roughly, depending on if we have already done it before, sometimes up to 5 minutes or 6 minutes. But I'm just asking the kids to sit there. I usually have a bell by me, so when the time is done, I let them know, and then they come over and they share the things when they were sitting quietly in their sit spot. What did they see? What did they smell? What did they hear? What did they feel on the ground? Sometimes I do bring things out with us too, like a mirror. I might give them a mirror where they can look up at the sky or look down below or look behind them or look in front of them with this mirror. Or I might give them a guidebook that has different birds. Maybe there's a lot of birds around, like right now in the spring when they're all really active. Let them look through that and see if they can find any birds. There's a lot of different things you could do. A journal even you could bring out if they want to draw different things that they see. Another way to do more sustainable choices, again, is to have like a repair station available to the children with different tools. Some of these it depends on your group, and it depends on, if you want to do these more one-on-one with them or have it out as an activity. But having sewing out, like a needle and thread, if something breaks, like we have costumes here that sometimes break, and then we just sit with the children and teach them how to sew. And they love to like even make their own little pillows with different things. Like if I just give them some fabric, they'll sew around the edges and they'll stuff it with different things. And it's just a fun activity to teach them how we can repair things. And I have screwdrivers out. A lot of our wooden chairs are held together with screws, and sometimes they come loose, and the children have those screwdrivers available to fix the chairs if they want. Oftentimes their curiosity gets them where they are taking apart the chairs, which is another really fun learning experience. And I totally love that they do that. But again, it's just a tool for them to get used to and to be part of that repairing process. Also like glue or there's tape. There's even tape that's not made out of plastic. It's like a paper tape that's a little bit more environmentally friendly. All these things are like if the kids break like if a book rips, which often happens with kids, allow them to be able to fix that, or at least see you see it. or at least have them see you do it. And then composting and recycling is the last one. Again, if we're sending less to the landfill, we're spending less money on, well, hopefully, ideally, you would spend less money on a garbage service. Oftentimes garbage services can have you can have the big can or the little can, and it will save you some money to have a smaller can. If you're sending less to the landfill, you'll need to send less or spend less on doing that. And so try to recycle and compost materials as much as you can. And then just some other pictures for you guys. So the picture on the left top is just us cooking popcorn over a fire. We love to just do different things off grid. Again, finding sticks and wood out in nature that you can then make into a fire and cook the food directly over it. The boat picture is one that my grandparents had. I was looking for a boat that had a hole in it that people couldn't use anymore. And my grandparents had one that gifted it to the school, and we just fill it with sand, and the children can use that as their sandbox, and they do a lot of fun play. So that's, again, repurposing something into something new and fun and engaging. The bottom left picture is by our tree swing. So we just have this big maple tree out there that we just put a simple rope swing on. And we also have different loose tires and boards that were warped that we couldn't really use for building out there for the kids to build their own obstacle courses and things with. And then the right picture is just a fun one of our goats. This is a really fun experience for the children to be able to watch these two babies being born on the farm. And this is another example of experiences over things, or like man-made materials, but again, connecting children to nature and those different life cycles. And if you want to have more from me, we just put out a book, my friend Rob Greenfield and I, and a bunch of other contributors as well. I'm a contributing author to this book. I wrote 13 of the 35 activities, and there are just a lot of great illustrations in here to engage children. And then there's instructions on how to do different activities, like make your own piñata, or the sit spot activities. And there are actually a lot of different ones that you could use in a classroom, but also with kids in your life, even in your personal life. It's a good one. So I'd highly recommend that book. And then I am on social media too, if you want to follow the Little Barnyard Preschool or Zero Waste Duluth. I run a community group here in Duluth where I share more about my personal zero waste lifestyle, but a lot of it, again, does just overlap with how I run a school. And then I also blog about my school at zerowastetoNatureschool.com. So yeah, now we're ready for questions.
All right, thank you. I will stop sharing my screen so you can see people if they want to be seen. And Jenny and Anna, who I mentioned at the beginning, are also here with us, so they can answer more questions about the project. But I did see one question in the chat, and I believe we talked about this a little bit at our winter curriculum, because we talked about how we use fire. And so licensing does not have rules that say you can't have a fire. They do, I'm going to remove our pins so that you can see everybody equally. So okay, so now hopefully you should be able to see everybody kind of the same on your screen. So licensing doesn't have rules about having fires, but I definitely recommend having a fire policy in place, as well as training for teachers. So we do training over several days and sometimes weeks to help teachers get comfortable with having fires in their space. And we do start with things that children are comfortable with, which is usually around dramatic play or around at large group. We talk about fires. When we did have our first fire of the year, we have a firefighter come, and this year we had a firefighter come and was with us while we got the fire started, and talk to children about being safe around fires. But yeah, you can do that yourself in your program. If you're interested in more resources, I can put my email in the chat. I know April shared the ways that you can contact her. I'm really bad at social media, but but I can share with you some of the training things that we go through to talk about fires at school. So April or Jenny or Anna, do you have anything you want to add about fires?
Something that we do here, again, we do all that stuff too, Sheila. And then we also, in my parent handbook, the policy handbook there, we have a special spot about fires and just about, what we do with fires. And it's also a permission form for the whole year for children to be around the fires. So it's just opening up that conversation with parents if you're worried about parents feeling a little bit nervous about it. Just giving them more information up front about it. And it's just a great way to establish those relationships a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. I think having transparency around those things is great. Our first family event of the winter is also a fire. So we have a community bonfire. And so families know like that we have fire pits at school. We needed an extra one because, well, COVID. So we had 3 different spaces where there were fires so that everyone wasn't around one. And then we had snacks that you would, come to and then take to a fire. But we let the families know that that's a way that we do gather. And with being outside for so many hours a day, a fire can be really great when it's really cold outside, just to warm up. But again, we use chalk on the ground to delineate where children can walk. We don't let children walk right up to the fire. And we have rules like only teachers add food to the fire once the fire is started, but the children help build up the fire at the beginning, but then the ongoing maintenance is what we call a grown-up job. So any other questions? I didn't see any other ones in the chat. Someone shared. Oh, some more books. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing some other books that you like with environmental themes. Yeah. Jenny, anything that you wanted to add before we get going? I know we only have a couple minutes left. Your first activity to be sustainable. And April, do you have any ideas for someone who's like, okay, I just want to start doing one thing that I haven't done before? What would you think a good first step would be?
Oh my goodness, there's so many.
And it really depends, right, on what you already do.
I think whatever you're inspired to do, if it's making your own paper, that might feel like a lot to some people, but it might feel really inspiring to other people. Maybe just having kids start making their own snack with you with more like whole foods. Just really ingraining, like weaving it very holistically within your program already. Oh, there's just so many. I mean, really, my focus a lot of the time is about trying to reduce our waste and our landfill waste. So usually my stuff is like, okay, look in the trash can. Actually, I do a trash audit. This is what I normally tell people to do when they're looking to reduce waste. Do a trash audit of your school waste or even in your home, wherever you want to start, and just look at what type of trash you're creating and try to pick one thing where you don't want to try to create that type of trash anymore. And there's so many different solutions. And so really your answer could just be lying in the trash can. Yeah. So that's actually what I recommend people doing the most. Generally that's a recommendation for a personal lifestyle, but it really translates over to a school and working with kids as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah. And I also think another like easy first step is to switch from cleaning your tables with real cloth instead of paper towels because you're not washing your hands. I mean, you're not cleaning your tables as often as you're washing hands, but just making the switch for cleaning tables with cloth instead of cleaning tables with paper towels is a really nice step. You'll actually save money on paper towels, and it's really easy because you wash off the tables, put that one in the in the wash for another day, and then. But you can reuse those as much as you want. Someone had a question about licensing and like bunny poo or animal waste. April's is a family licensed family child care center. I work at a licensed center. And there aren't any licensing problems. Obviously, they want you to not have them next to places where children eat, but there aren't any rules that say, and children do not clean the cages indoors themselves. That's another grown-up job.
Mhm. One thing my licensor asked me to do is just to have the children wash their hands after animal interactions. So once we're done at the farm, we just go up to the spigot at the back of the house and wash our hands. So that's something I think that probably would be in the licensing rules in my information, at least for family childcare. Just around, it's probably just included with all the general hand washing things, like wash your hands after going to the bathroom, or wash your hands before you're prepping food, or different things like that. Yeah, otherwise, similar to what you said.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely washing hands after any interactions. And I suggest washing them even before, just depending on what children were doing before handling pets, just as a way to not introduce things, especially if you're going from one pet to the other. And then someone had a question about dealing with ticks. April, do you have a lot of ticks up there?
Yeah, we do. We actually have free-ranging chickens, so our property is very low on ticks, and that's why I like free-ranging chickens, because they eat the ticks a lot. I mean, I don't find a lot of ticks on me or the kids, and we go into the depths of the woods, and the chickens don't even go out that far, but they really do maintain our space really well. I do at times find ticks, but not as much as I would have expected. And I know we have ticks around because my neighbor just 2 doors down, he saves ticks actually in a jar just to see how many he gets on him, because he goes like way out too in the woods, and I mean he's constantly finding them on him. So I know that those chickens are really helpful, but I usually just ask parents, when tick season is starting, make sure you're checking your kids every day after class, because we are out in the woods. I might miss it, or I might not have time to check them. Sometimes I do if I know that it's like a really high tick season during class, but just for the parents to be involved with that process. Because I think with ticks, you want to just try to get them off, within a certain amount of time, because that's when it can start to cause problems if they're on for, I don't know, is it like, I don't know the numbers to say, but I think it's like many hours. Yeah.
So wonderful. Well, we are out of time already. I was like, oh, there's more questions. Sorry we can't get to all the questions tonight, but thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for watching. For more information and resources, visit the Outdoor and Nature-Based Learning webpage at dcyf.mn.gov. You can also scan the QR code to go directly to the website. For those who need develop credit, who are develop users, this is unfortunately not a develop approved webinar. It didn't meet the 2-hour training requirement, so you're unable to get this added to your develop record. However, if you need a certificate of participation, you can still get a clock hour form by emailing kelly.kazik@state.mn.us and requesting the evaluation of learning survey. And once you complete the survey, there is an opportunity to download the certificate of participation at the end. If you have any questions or would like a copy of the slides, please email kelly.kazik@state.mn.us. Thank you and have a good day.